Goldfinger.
Hello and welcome to day 5 of Bondcember. We are talking about the third Eon film, Goldfinger, and boy, this is sort of like where it really gets started. So I'm Tom.
Yeah, I'm Joe.
Well, Mr. Joe, do you expect us to review some Bond movies?
No, Mr. Tom, I expect you to die.
Yeah, so this is really where the sort of the Bond formula coalesces.
Yeah, it's, really the where everything comes together, everything gels, and it becomes this massive hit, and it becomes this massive series of blockbusters for the next, 4 decades and plus. It's still going on now.
Yeah. So this time, Bond is investigating gold smuggling magnate Ulrich Goldfinger and his plans to raid, or rather contaminate, Fort Knox. And
Yeah,
I feel that this is...
it doesn't seem like it would be the one that would be the mega smash blockbuster. You kind of have to see it in action.
Because this is where you get really... Because up until this point, like, Dr. No is a great character, and, he's quite... But the problem is, he comes into the film, an hour and a half in. You basically have, I think, 3 scenes with Dr. No as like actually doing anything. Yeah, Goldfinger is in this from the start. This is very much like, okay,
Yeah.
no, this guy is very much, this guy is, driving the plot from the get-go.
Yeah, and he is very much a character, and he's a very good character, even though there's a little thing like Gert Frobe, who plays him, like he very much has the characterization, but what you don't know is that that's not his actual voice.
Yeah.
Because Gert Frobe, obviously, is a German actor. So he was dubbed by Michael Collins, not the historical Michael Collins, but just an actor named Michael Collins. So what you're hearing is not Gert's actual voice. So,
And this is
so-
sort of
which
the
is-
thing with some of the Bond girls up until this point. You will get very attractive, Eastern European or sort of Swedish model, or somebody from basically their English isn't great, but they look amazing. Therefore, just get someone in to dub them.
So, yeah, it's kind of weird to describe this because, as I said, it's kind of hard to discuss how it works unless you see it work, because it doesn't have a whole lot of action in it, and it's a lot of build up, and it's a lot of going to places and having conversations, and it's kind of like the opening starts with the part of the Bond movie, that opening sequence has nothing to do with everything else. It just wants to show James Bond doing James Bond things.
Yeah.
And a reminder, there will be action later. So he does this thing where he blows up this drug dealer place, and they're out on a bunch of money, and then there's this woman he obviously knows was working with the villains, but they're trying to capture James Bond, and then he fights with them. And then the girl gets in the middle of it, and then he has to fight this henchman who somehow gets his weapon, James Bond's weapon, but he tosses he gets it he falls in a tub that has water in it, so he tosses like a heater into it and zaps him, and he's like, then you have the James Bond like clunker of a one line.
Oh,
which is shocking. Positively shocking.
Yeah, it's shocking.
And then, yes. And then we have the start of the movie, and the main plot actually goes from there. So
Yeah. And then we have
the thing about the movie is everything feels right, which is not always the thing you could say about the first two. I mean, even though Sean Connery was wrapped up in actually doing a Hitchcock movie, Marnie, for the first couple days in Miami. So there's obvious rear screen Miami, but it more feels like you're in Miami than when they say they were at Hagia Sophia or Venice in From Russia with Love. And all the scenes, like, there's the right amount of repartee, and there's going about the business, and it feels like the scale is correct. It doesn't feel like they're holding back anything, and it
Mm.
it even works well when they're describing the plot, which is like it feels like a whole fart of a nothing when it starts out, because you have all of these rich British people who are very upset that Arik Goldfinger is smuggling gold and upping the value of his gold while lowering the value, and they're all having like this brandy with an overdose of bon noir, and
Very.
I probably said that completely wrong, but
Well, this
and
isn't.
they're all stiffy and British and drink a lot, and this is supposed to be should be a really boring scene, but you're going with it and you keep going with the movie, even though it's just like a whole lot of peace building, and they throw in a whole lot of things that at events, like they have Jill Masterson, the girl who first helps him Bond spy on Goldfinger because he's cheating at rummy, and she's helping him, and then he finds out like somebody screwed up, and then he just dumps her in gold, suffocates her, and then leaves the body on Bond's bed after leaving. And then you have the introduction to Oddjob, who is the henchman, who is like the who has a very obvious thing that he does, and he's played by Harold Sakata, a Korean wrestler who, he's obviously very well built, but he also has a hat that has razors in it. And then later there's Tilly Masterson, who's out to kill Goldfinger for revenge, and then Oddjob kills her by hitting her with the hat, which thankfully it's in a distance, because they kind of knew if they actually used this on a person it wouldn't be convincing, and also they couldn't show it if they could. But so they have it go in the distance, and they just do this thing where he does decapitate statues to show what it can do. So
Yeah, but
it kind of has where they show it and don't tell it, but there's also stuff you have to imply.
yeah.
And then they have the master plan, which Bond stumbles into, which is to not raid Fort Knox, not to steal it, but to irradiate the gold and make all of his stuff. And he has to make the good part of this movie is they make it obvious that this guy is an egotistical, like, asshole who, like, doesn't think much of the people who he helps, or who help him, and it has no qualms about killing them. Like, he has this big display that he built to reveal his big plan, and there is no reason it should have been built, because his plan, after he tells everybody, is to immediately hit them with this Delta 9 gas that is fatal, and kill all of the people involved with the plan after telling them, okay, you're going to stay with this plan and you're going to make millions of dollars, which is not how this is supposed to work. I mean, other Bond villains get it right. Like, it sets up the scene where there's always one of the people who's like, I'm not comfortable with this plan, can I leave? And it's like, sure, you can leave. And then they lead him out and they kill them. And then the rest of the investors, who are equally evil, just stay in. But that's not how this works. Like, they get a bunch of gangsters in the room and he just kills them too. But he just kills the guy who left in a more elaborate way.
I let Oddjob do this one. He wanted to do it. He was having so much fun.
He was happy to do it. He is a happy man.
Look how he's smiling.
Harold Sakata, I mean, obviously he's not an actor. He is a Korean wrestler, but he gets so much joy out of it, and you get a lot of joy after seeing him in it. So.
And hell, he was very good in GoldenEye, I'm reliably informed. the game.
My brother figured that out in GoldenEye 007, how to beat him, because it's so much easier to get headshots on him, which is so you just kill him sooner and you call it a day. And so, but anyway,
but I feel like
we'll talk about the GoldenEye video game when we get to the GoldenEye movie. But
yeah, I feel like this is where the formula it clicks. It's sort of I watched obviously these through in fairly quick succession, and you can sort of it's almost palpable the moment it just goes, okay, Shirley Bassey is singing. We've just had we've just had this happen. We've just had, this standoff. We've got a really good villain, and the scenes in which obviously Goldfinger and Bond are, on screen together. There's actually quite a number of them, including the most suspenseful golf tournament in cinema. It's like, okay, we're gonna play golf.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Bond, that's fine. I'm gonna. What's your reason? Drops a gold bar, and it's like, okay.
Drops Nazi gold on him. They try to bait him with like they have this Nazi gold they can give him, and they obviously know how to, toy with him. But he's a little smarter, and he's he has his plan in place. So he kind of like your two interruptions have made it clear for. He's smart, but he's too full of himself to like just let it go.
Yeah.
So like there's the one thing I do want to say is like the car chase is absolutely bonkers if you actually map it out. Because obviously this takes place at Art Goldfinger's one of his gold smelting things where he's doing all of his smuggling in just outside of Geneva. So they go to this factory. There's this checkpoint that they have to pass through, and then, after he gets caught because they accidentally triggered an alarm, and so they're bringing him back in his car, and they're just like taking his car. So there's like nobody's like, what is this luxurious Aston Martin DB6? I think it's 5.
DB5, yeah, which is like
DB. Yeah. So so they bring him back. They're driving him in his car, and they make him drive. So and there's this Chinese henchman. They're working with the Chinese to disrupt the West, and pointing a gun at him. And that's where he uses the ejector seat Q introduced him to, which is like this is where they take the Q's modest introduction, then they go all out with it and just give him like the car, and that Bond has a penchant to explode things. They actually make a joke later on that he still has one of Q Branch's, like, where they talk about, oh, Bond, we have your luggage. And it's like, what happened to my attaché case? Well, we had a little incident with it. So, like, I'm thinking just one of these Chinese henchmen tried to open it up, and it exploded in their face.
Well, he's dead, dead.
So, yeah, it's one of the cute references. They don't go full, like this happened in another movie, but there's like the best part of like Goldfinger is like I wouldn't say best, but it's like one of the things I watch and like is there small references to previous movies. Like when he talks to Felix, it's like we were in worse jams in Jamaica.
Yeah, so you might remember that from Dr. No, where we did the thing.
No, you don't remember that because you were a different actor. You were the guy who says "Bookum Dano" back then.
But I feel like this is also where the sort of the really corny one-liners appear.
Yeah, they go all out, but they're delivered with such
panache
by Sean Connery that you forgive it.
Yeah. No, and it does also add the villain going, no, I am gonna kill you. No, I'm not gonna kill you. No, hang on up. No, I'm not going to kill you, Mr. Bond. Mr. Bond, you're more important to me alive, and I'm not going to regret this in about half an hour at all.
No, and but that car chase where after they get caught, they bring him back in. So and then once he gets through the checkpoint, he gets out of the checkpoint, and then he drives back to the factory, which is weird. You think you're getting away from the factory, but then he just drives back until he gets caught because he thinks a mirror is another car coming after him, so he pulls aside and then wrecks the DB6. Another thing is he destroys the beautiful car.
Yeah.
So he gets captured, and then they put him in the... Goldfinger wants to show off that his penis is larger than James Bond's penis. Yeah. And how does he show that?
With a fuck-off laser.
This giant fuck-off laser that he's going to use to snip off Sean Connery's penis.
At least it comes back in the plot later, which is more than sometimes like the bomb, the web, the obviously the sharks or whatever. So okay. Yeah.
But we have some coding here. Coding for 60s cinema, where he's using literal big dick energy to try to, murder. It's like, yeah, I have you here, and there's no reason to keep you, so I'm just going to murder you with my big dick. And then he overhears this thing called Operation Grand Slam, and he's like, well, what about Operation Grand Slam? It's like, well, it's something you heard in a conversation you don't know. Well, the next station who replaces me is going to know all about it, and he's going to do his best to foil you. It's like, well, he's going to do a better job, but you can't really take that risk. You need me. No.
Damn.
And then, right before it saws off his dick, it's like, okay, fine.
And speaking of sort of genitals, oh boy, Pussy Galore is a great character, and it's sort of actually really...
It's a great character who gets one unfortunate moment that people do talk about as like, James Bond kind of really sucks, and it kind of represents this 60s masculinity and this 60s conservative viewpoint.
Mm. And so, Sean Connery definitely does, given his more recent comments.
Oh, yeah. But, she is coded lesbian. She clearly, works for the villain, gets, her money out of it and gets what she needs. And obviously, your charms won't work on me. I'm immune. And she has this, Pussy Galore's flying circus. Make of that what you will. Yeah. And then they're all women, so there's very obvious cues that she's lesbian. But then there's the infamous scene in the barn where, I'm supposed to seduce you, and you're supposed to have your way with me, but that's not what's going to happen. We're just going to go into this barn, and but then he judo flips her, and then, she judo flips him, and they just do that to a while, and then they have this kiss where it's very clearly she isn't into it, but then, Sean Connery's dick makes, even lesbian women straight. So she's like, okay, now I'm down with it. So there's, the rape, which the scene as played out, it's not super, blatant that, oh yeah, this is what's going on, but you can pick it up. I mean, it's very,
you can certainly go hang on a minute.
Context of the movie, the scene works because Honor Blackman and Sean Connery are very charming, and they kind of play it off as this screwball romance where there's the opposites who hate each other are starting to get together, and they get together through. But there's also the coded social side of it where this is not okay, and it's another thing where I see it. If you want to dislike this movie, you want to dislike James Bond, absolutely that is valid.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to consider that sort of in some of these cases, these films are over 50 years old, and they obviously are, a creation of the period, and obviously on top of that, they're adapting novels that are even older, at least for the sort of for the films that obviously for most of the films that we're going to talk about. I can understand. This is the first one I saw and went, yeah, I kind of understand what the whole thing about Bond is.
Yeah, because we have a friend who just if you bring up Bond, he will just endlessly talk shit and say it's the most useless franchise outside of Disney.
Yeah. But
and it's very hard because I do get this. It's commercial, it's reactionary, it enforces colonialism, it's all of this thing. But it is also a standard for action movies. It is this is the bar where you want to get above, and it is very. And apart from the actors and some of the set pieces and some of the amazing stunts like that, and it's a good measuring place for what society was doing, what we were going through, and how the least able to budge part of society was doing at the time. Yeah, so it's also a good social magnitude, and also they're really good action movies, and some of them go farther than others, and some of them actually examine it, but they don't examine it far enough because James Bond still has to be the hero. But it's,
Which
I mean, it's all of this. I understand it, and I also have to like put it together. It's my brother and I's thing that we loved to do when we were, teenagers, and it's, all of these things, and I have to, and I can, and can do that, and it's fair to do that. But if you're like skeeved out by this whole thing because like the prime example of the movie has a rape scene in it, good, that's fine, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, we're not saying for a moment like this series is for everybody, because obviously cinema is entirely subjective, and if you don't like the Connery era of Bond, you may like the more goofy era, sort of the more stuff or whatever. But I feel you cannot sort of underestimate these films as as you said, Joe, as sort of sociological documents. This is what the average sort of slightly middle of politically sort of centre to sort of centre right person is sort of interested. This is the interest of thing. You got to remember at the end of the day, this is the third film in the fifth most valuable product, film series on the planet.
Yeah, and it's gonna have like really clunky lines like, "My dear, there are some things like you do like." Serve Dom Perignon under, a certain temperature. It's like listening to the Beatles without earmuffs. And it's like, So that's what, like, the adults in the early 60s were thinking of these Beatles fellows.
Yeah. But
They were like, they were talking about them like the Backstreet Boys in the 90s.
Yeah. But I feel like this is sort of where one of the sort of the key things, obviously, alongside everything else. Well, two of the key things. This is the first real Bond song. I mean, From Russia with Love has a song, but it's sort of like, can you sing it? Mm-hmm. Can you remember what it goes like? And this is like Shirley Bassey turns up. You have the sweeping strings. You have sort of, Shirley Bassey absolutely belting it. And it's sort of like, this is the first really key Bond, and this is also the first real time you get the sort of the title sequence, which obviously becomes the thing. And the second thing is the merchandising. Because boy, that DB5 thing is absolutely iconic in terms of like toys. I know somebody who's got one from the original thing, and it's missing the ejector seat. Because this was, I believe, I'm not entirely sure. This is one of the little, obviously the little DB5 model was the must-have, was the biggest selling toy of 1960. This is a point, obviously, we're talking pre-Jaws, pre-thing. Mm-hmm. This is really when cinematic merchandising becomes a big thing, and obviously we will go on to talk a little bit, obviously, particularly when we get to the 90s films, on how sort of Bond is marketed and how it becomes the toys and the games and the like.
And there is it becomes very much Thunderball. Thunderball, I think, is one of the movies that starts the engine of going like franchises and like big commercial stuff. And because like we have said previously, it had a larger budget than the previous three movies combined, and it was just this massive thing that they had to release at the right time to maximize profits, and that led to certain problems, but they just threw around money, and it was by far the longest Bond movie for the longest time. It clocked in about 2 hours and 10 minutes, but obviously we'll get to Thunderball when we get to it.
Yeah, which is next time, I believe.
Next time.
But this is where obviously also the key, this is where Bond hype becomes, as just a closing thing, because this is the fastest grossing film of all time. Or was it one at one point was the fastest grossing thing. And a weird little tidbit, the DeMille City Cinema in New York, this had to stay open for 24 hours a day to show this. This is the as I said in the previous episode, this is sort of you go, Doctor No, okay, things are working. This formula works. We're making money on this. We've made, 47, 50 million off, a million. Okay, let's do it
Mhm.
again. Okay, now we're making 70 million. Okay, this is going well. Okay, let's give it 3 million. Oh, bloody hell, this thing has made, 125 million dollars, which is
Yeah,
a lot of
a
money.
lot of money in
Yeah,
1960s. So, and
yeah,
then let's give them over 20 million.
yeah. And
But this is really where Bond becomes iconic, but it still has the lean attitude of like the previous films. Like,
mm,
I mean, they weren't the like fastest paced movies, but they moved at a decent pace,
mm.
and they still felt like they got the whole story in, and they didn't have to feel they lingered on too much, and uh, they were under 2 hours, which Thunderball is not gonna be.
But we will get to Thunderball tomorrow. So we will see you next episode.